All right. We are going to go ahead and call this meeting to order, special meeting of the Vallejo City Council at 5:06 p.m. And I will ask our city clerk to please conduct a roll call.
Mayor Source.
Present.
Vice Mayor Matulik.
Present.
Council members Beginzer.
Present.
Gordon.
Present.
Palmaris.
Present.
I will note for the record that council members Ledeju and Matias are currently absent.
All right, thank you. So we have a special meeting tonight with 2 items. We're going to be hearing a presentation from our consultants, the Roosevelt Group, on their maritime revitalization plan, and then we will be doing the study session on the 26-27 budget. So we'll do this item between an hour, we're thinking about an hour and a half, and then by 7 we'll be ready to start the budget. We'll take a short recess in between those 2 items, and we will go ahead and proceed right to the action calendar. I'll ask our city clerk to please announce item 3A.
Receive and accept a presentation of the City of Vallejo's strategic plan on maritime revitalization and provide feedback.
All right, thanks. So we will go ahead and open up public comment on this item. We'll hear the presentation, and then we'll take public comment after the presentation. And I'll turn it over to our acting city manager, Conley, to introduce our guests this evening.
Yes, thank you so much. Nangua Conley, acting city manager. Really happy to bring this item forward. It's something that I know that the city of Vallejo is very interested in. I know that there's a lot of folks who weighed in on this strategic plan, who the consultants had a chance to talk to, but just really wanted to, express my gratitude and appreciation to the Roosevelt Group for bringing this strategic plan to fruition. As mentioned in the staff report, it's very comprehensive. It's dense, so we are not going to talk about every actionable strategy within the plan. There are 27 of them. What we did was we pulled out the ones for the near term to kind of focus on the ones that are the most implementable for the short term, because some of the other ones are longer term and will require some additional conversation. But this really is a great framework for us to start these conversations. This isn't the end of the conversation. This is just the beginning. So now we have things to actually bring forward to the public, to solicit feedback, to get your feedback as council. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Nate Polkovitz from the Roosevelt Group to start his presentation.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council, for having us here tonight, and for truly the partnership that has been going on since December of this past year. So we tried to meet with as many folks as we could throughout that 4-month period, and apologize to those who we didn't get a chance to meet with, but we felt we had a good group of people that were very open and honest with us, and appreciate all the local support in helping us really get a vision of where Vallejo wants to be, where you are today. And then we also took kind of what we know about the federal environment in DC and tried to merge that together to what was called the framework for you all to consider and really focus your efforts on, to see really where you have the resources, where you have the energy, where you have the shared vision to kind of move forward. It is somewhat of a menu, 27 recommendations, but it really is the full menu for you to choose from, and really focus in those areas that you think are the highest impact. And so with that, I'll start the presentation. And so the discussion this evening is quick overview. For those who we didn't get a chance to meet with, I just want to give an overview of our firm, and then an overview of the entire effort. I'll talk about on a high level, we have 3 distinct pillars in the plan. I'll talk about those. I'll talk about what's going on currently in DC, just to, again, give you a framework of what this administration is thinking, where the funding is at, and where things are headed to. And then we'll get into the specific actions and really bucket them into the near term, the 0 to 1 year action items, the 1 to 3 year action items, and more of the long term, out to 10-year type of action items for consideration, and really the charge forward, what's next. And then open up for comment and questions. So the Roosevelt Group, we're a bipartisan firm out of DC. We do national security advocacy. What's unique about the Roosevelt Group is that we do have a core group of like Sierra sitting next to me and myself, full-time staff. But what makes us unique is we do have 100 subject matter experts that come from government, that are retired admirals from the Coast Guard, from the Navy. We're senior executives for multiple agencies who provided input, not all of them on this report, but a select few on this report that provided their insights. Those folks who ran shipyards for the Navy provided input to this report. Those who worked in the Coast Guard provided input. So we use those subject matter experts and their backgrounds and their knowledge of past and current environments to help shape this report. So moving forward, what the reality is you have a great asset in Mare Island, right? And it's underutilized based on inconsistency demand signal from the commercial sector as well as the federal government. And what the opportunity is before us is this effort really started with Rep. Garamendi and his SHIPS Act proposal, where it's really taken a slight turn. It's a turn, but a slight turn is the president released his Maritime Action Plan back in February. So it really has the components of where this administration and this Congress, in a bipartisan effort, is really taking a look at shipbuilding in the future and the maritime industry. So now's the time to take advantage of that forward momentum that's coming from DC. And so what I'll talk to is that three-pillar strategy to make Vallejo a West Coast premier hub for ship repair and basing, as well as create an ecosystem for the maritime tech environment. And so for the mayor, for you and the council to consider from this plan, again, is how can you best choose the pathway that's right for you within the amount of resources that you have that can give you the highest return on investment. And as was mentioned, I'm going to talk about the strategic plan, but I'm not going to go into a great amount of detail. I believe the strategic plan was posted and is available for everyone, but it's about 130 pages of reading, but we feel we've really captured kind of the current environment and some really good proposed ways forward. But getting off with Pillar 1, I mentioned Mare Island as the strategic asset, but it is really the epicenter of a maritime environment out here. So the way Mare Island goes for maritime environment is the way the city of Vallejo is going to go. So without those key critical assets that are sitting out there, really the maritime revitalization of the area would be really hard to make it in that area. For Pillar 2, we looked at the finger piers out there that are shown in that beautiful picture of Vallejo. At one time they were basing naval vessels. Is there another opportunity to have a long-term investment by a federal entity, whether it's the Coast Guard or the Navy, to bring ships here, to bring families here, to bring jobs here? So we looked at that in Pillar 2, and then Pillar 3 is where we really focused on that more of a human aspect of how do you develop the K through 12 education in Vallejo? How do you get them how do we bring in startup companies? How do you create a tech accelerator, et cetera? So how do you really create that, start to finish ecosystem that is self-sustaining? And with that, in the bumper sticker on the bottom of the slide, it really takes the economic development tools and the levers of the city to really make some of these things work. Going into Pillar 1, I mentioned this is the shipbuilding and ship repair. So how do you bring that back? The United States at one time was a leader in this industry and has fallen off that, making less than 1% of the commercial ships today. So there's a strategic push by this administration to bring shipbuilding back, not only on the commercial side, but even on the federal side with shipbuilding for Navy and Coast Guard vessels, behind schedule, over budget. Really, how do we create that maritime industrial base? And it really starts with Vallejo sending a demand signal out to the market to say, hey, we are here, we're ready, we have ready assets. So how do you do that? So if you look at the slide in the focus areas, it's really organizing around creating a defense community around national security, around the industrial base, and say, hey, we have these assets, we want to go here, we're willing to do X, Y, and Z to get there. you come partner with us. So it's really, we talk about in the plan, how do you create those different coalitions, some through public-private partnerships, some mayor could be through a city-led coalition with either task force or steering groups that can be generated. But ultimately, you have to show that you have skin in the game, that you're organized, and you have a clear vision. So part of that skin in the game is, making some improvements to the dry docks potentially to attract investors. So it's really, where do you want to go? How do you market that? And what kind of partnerships can you create? The second pillar is more of a strategic presence, and this is really a long-term outlook from the Coast Guard and the Navy. We looked at shipbuilding plans. What are those vessels that will have funding that are scheduled to be completed in the next decade? Where do they have an overcapacity of current home porting? And what would be a good fit for those finger piers on Mare Island? And I really like that picture, the historical photo out there, because you can really see how many vessels you can get at there. Now, you're not going to do that today, but because there's a little bit more stringent restrictions, but the capability is there. It exists today with a little bit of dredging and some TLC. It can come back to be one of those ports. So what we talk about in the plan is the process that the Coast Guard and the Navy use to figure out where they're going to station these next ships. And really that there's slight differences in the two processes, but they fundamentally are the same in that they focus on where is that ship going to perform its mission? Is it in close proximity? What is the industrial capacity of the area that ship is home ported? So can you do the repairs and other availabilities at that location? The third one is probably the most important one, is can you take care of the troops and their families, right? So that's all the way from spouse employment to education to medical facilities to birthing for unaccompanied housing and so forth. So that's a huge factor that the government considers when they determine where are we going to base things. And from our research over the last several months, that's one of the keys. The birthing and being able to house service members is one of the factors that Vallejo really needs to consider as you look at both bringing repair work to Mare Island, but also some future home porting. And ultimately, cost is a factor. And I think with the Navy in particular, where they invested a lot of money up in the Northwest in seismic mitigation, I think they would have a similar concern with this area, although it is, through our research showed it was not a concern, but the mindset of the Navy would want to see, hey, and the Coast Guard to say, hey, this is not a concern and here's why. We looked at this and it's not, so we're ready to be there. So really there is an opportunity here, as you see, as we'll get further on in the slides when we talk about long-term goals. This would be a long-term goal. This takes a lot of time to get on the radar of the federal government as a potential site, and then to actually get those targeted to be here and have the appropriate upgrades made. Moving on to the final pillar, pillar 3. I talked about that workforce, that human capital, and how do you create that pathway? When we met with the Vallejo School District, Cal Poly's right here. You have all the tools in place, and what it looked like to us is, starting with creating that career and technical educational pathway in the school district to really introduce folks to the maritime industry. And it's a variety of stuff. Right now, it's not necessarily that you go into trades, which is a great, viable career that enhances national security, but it could be in AI and naval architecture. It could be robotics. It's autonomous vehicles. So it's got a wide range of topics that our young kids are kind of thriving for and in the midst of right now with technology innovation. So it's about how do you educate the K through 12 here? How do you launch those tech accelerators? Like I talked about, attracting people and potentially becoming a named California accelerator hub for maritime out here. How do you attract the investors here? How do you create facilities where they can bring their prototypes here or bring their startup here and test those facilities on the water for autonomous or robotic vehicles? And then once they prove a concept, how do you get them to move their business here? So it's really that whole ecosystem that that we're trying to create and our recommendations are around. And, to sum it up is kind of on the bottom of the slide is the train the workforce, kind of create that accelerator, prove a concept, and then deploy that concept here. And all these things, as I mentioned in the beginning, cannot be done without kind of the economic engine of the Vallejo economic development arm. So what we offered were several recommendations on how that can be enhanced and how to market Vallejo in a different way. Potentially creating a Vallejo enterprise fund that provides us some additional flexibility in either attracting investors or making sites ready for investors, doing environmental work, getting things ready to go so things are move-in ready, but establishing that fund does provide some flexibility. Then we talk a lot about attracting startups. Another key piece of this is really understanding who you have here today and then keeping them here and helping them grow, which I know the department's already looking at. We make some recommendations in there as well. But in general, these fundamental tools are ways that you're going to create those incentives to attract the maritime population. And we have a few other sections of the plan that talk about, how to get some federal dollars for dredging, how to remove some abandoned vessels, those type of things. And then we provide in the end a laundry list of all the federal funding opportunities, grant opportunities, again, that could be applicable. Not that you'll go after every one, but I think it's key to understand what's out there and then focus on some key ones and do that repetitively. So I'm going to shift gears now and talk about the DC landscape just to show you where we're at today. This is a current budget cycle of the FY27 appropriations that start FY27 starts October 1 of this year. So the president just released his budget earlier in April, and then the more detailed budget April 21st. So Congress is going through that right now, having hearings on it, and ultimately the House and Senate will decide where they take that. It's a historical size budget this year, $1.5 trillion, which is 441, I think, billion higher than last year's was enacted. So a huge budget to consider this year, and the forecast is kind of similar size budgets in the future to come. So the question is where are they putting that money? And this are the key investments, strategic priorities, and kind of the personal and readiness ones. This is specifically for Department of War, that budget that I talked about, that 1.5 trillion. But as you can see down that one column of key investments, it's a focus on shipbuilding and the industrial base. And there's also, as we mentioned in the report, like the unmanned systems is one of those key focus areas that we think Vallejo could be extremely successful with. There's a lot of money going into that research and development and buying those assets for the Navy. And then, you look on the right side, strategic priorities. I didn't circle this, but again, defense industrial base is just a key component of the plan and will be, and it has bipartisan support in that aspect. And then just to give you a concept of the Department of the Navy specifically, this is just a snapshot of their 27 budget. And again, everything's, when you look at this year's budget, is historical. So, some of the things that jump out are 75 vessels, battle force vessels in the next 5 years, next 5-year budget cycle. So that's a huge inventory that they're trying to bring to fruition. And one of the key vessels that we said, hey, you could target for home porting here is a new frigate, which the Navy's going to use a Coast Guard cutter hull, which Mare Island Dry Dock has already serviced. It fits out there. It fits on the piers. Is the frigate the right platform to advocate for a home port here? And as you see from that chart, they'll start building the initial frigate in FY29, and then some follow-ons in FY31 later. So when we talk about the long game, that's playing the long game, getting ready for that kind of time frame. But again, historical budget for Department of War, but also Department of Transportation. And so I mentioned the President's Maritime Action Plan. Some of the components of that, or most of the components of that, are focused on commercial shipbuilding, where the funding comes down through the Department of Transportation and MARAD. So with this, one part of the Maritime Action Plan has this creation of a Maritime Security Trust Fund. So this legislation actually creates it and puts $1.4 billion towards those key aspects of the Maritime Action Plan. I have up there the Port Infrastructure Development Program, $450 million. I know the city is applying for grants currently in that arena, so that pot of money is getting bigger. So the likelihood to get some of those grants improves. The second bullet on there, I'm not going to go through all these, but the second bullet really focuses on the Merchant Marine Academy. But in the Maritime Action Plan, it focuses on the federal academy, but it also focuses on the state academy. So Cal Poly Maritime, we can foresee in the future budgets that they will be getting similar amounts of funding to help those programs. So more money coming in. What this really just shows is that the Maritime Action Plan is out there, and now they're starting to put legislation and funding together to actually resource and be able to enact that plan. So it's again a critical time to kind of revitalize the maritime focus. And lastly, just our recommended action. These aren't all 27 of them. I grouped many of them together that were similar in nature, but again, wanted to focus on really that left-hand side. And the most important, and we've said it in kind of our discussions throughout developing this plan, but is that coalition, the city-led coalition, and mayor taking the lead on that is probably one of the fundamental pieces to get going, is to establish that organization, to create that vision, to get the buy-in from the local stakeholders and start building that coalition, and then going to engage and market and being that person who can go engage in the DC area and throughout the maritime industry itself. So looking really at that near term, I kind of break those down on this next slide. I talk about the one voice. It's so critical. We work with a lot of defense communities, over 20 defense communities right now, and it's very important that when you go talk to senior leaders that they know who they're talking to and what they represent. So we've had many cities or counties try and come in multiple times, meeting with senior officials, and afterwards, we didn't bring them in, but they would meet with senior officials, and the official would say, well, who do I talk to? Which one of them truly represents the community out there and can make decisions and can be a partner? And that's really where I see the city of Vallejo in this coalition building, is that you've got to be able to create that coalition, be that single voice, that shared vision, and then be the one to help market it, to host industry days, to go to DC, to talk to the congressional delegation, and have that really solid plan as you move out. The second one on there, the Maritime Prosperity Zone promotion, there is currently this is again, part of the Maritime Action Plan is the creation of 100 Maritime Prosperity Zones. The individual who wrote the plan or authored the plan from the National Security Council has also put together 6 or so legislative proposals that will actually help enact these maritime prosperity zones, and they will reveal those in the next month or so. So it's key to kind of watch to see how that's playing out, the nomination process, if there is one. It may be driven from a top-down perspective, but really understanding what's going on with that legislation tied to the Maritime Action Plan is critical. And then the next ones I pretty much summarized together, but everything is kind of summarized on the right-hand slide, which is really the main takeaway. You've got to be really aggressive, really organized, and be vocal. You've got to send that demand signal that you're ready to go, which you do. That's your strength. Mare Island are ready to go assets with some minor tweaks. They're ready to go. So that's the strength. So again, organize, market, and then kind of engage those leaders. And with that, hopefully I didn't provide too high of a level of summary, but happy to go into some additional areas further. But really, I just want to kind of show you where our focus was. But again, just want to thank the mayor and the council and for all the stakeholders we engage with, because I think we got a really good sense of the community and where you want to go. And we know you need help getting there, and we want to help be part of that solution to get that revitalization. So thank you.
Yeah, Thank you so much. Really, really appreciate that, like being able to condense that much information very, very clearly, and it's very exciting. Before we get to questions and comments from the council, why don't we go ahead and take public comment on the item? Do we have anyone in person?
No one signed up in person, Mayor.
All right, how about online?
Through the mayor, no members of the public signed up online at this time.
All right, we will go ahead then and close public comment, although if people, I might do one more round later. It's a big item and folks might be, getting off work and just now signing on. So I'm happy to take lights from my colleagues. I guess want to start with a broad question. First of all, thank you all for doing this. I think we sort of, as a council, knew that we had this opportunity. We were hearing all this buzz. We wanted to show leadership, and we really appreciate the Roosevelt Group for taking this on and kind of helping us move through the process, and our acting city manager at ACM for shepherding the city through that side of the process after we took this on. The one big stakeholder, probably the biggest stakeholder in all of this, other than the city, is Mare Island Company. And one of the things that I've thought about a lot through this process is the fact that, the thing that differs from where we were 30 years ago is that the island is privately owned. And so I'm wondering if you can speak to your experience working with Mare Island Company and the development of this, and how you think the partnership looks, given that a lot of this is their land.
That's a great question, and not one that's normally, this situation is not normal, where you have a federal government say we don't need this land and then potentially needing it again, and trying to work that out. That's why we haven't seen any future backgrounds recently. But I think that it's a great question, because it gets at some of the complexity of this issue. But I think the coalition where we've seen the greatest success is when, whether I mentioned the task force earlier, but we work with communities to build in alliances. There's different alliances or defense alliances across the country, and they're typically set up as like a 501c4, I believe it is. But they're set up where there is a board, there's an active board, there's a voting group, a steering committee, where you have private entities as well as municipalities as board members on those, where you have that shared vision, you set up that organization, you're that one voice from the community, and you have buy-in from everybody, right, on the direction you want to go. So once you get that buy-in, and especially with Mare Island, and I think from talking with them, is they're widely open to maritime development, and if somebody came and gave them an offer today to kind of buy that shipyard, I don't want to speak for them, but they would probably take it. But I think it's critical that their plan as well leaves open the option. I think their development plan leaves open the option of redeveloping that waterfront area as the final phase. So allowing time to work with the city and others to really say, is there a viable platform here to bring maritime development back? And if it does go 10 years, 15 years, and there's no development, then they obviously have to, as the owners, have to have a off-ramp and a plan B, right? So I think bringing them into a formalized coalition is the way to do it, because I think you'll find that they support it, and you can get buy-in on that shared vision statement and shared actions that get you to that North Star or that end state.
Yeah, thank you for that. And so would you say, I think I understand the structure of the public-private partnership, and that makes a lot of sense. As we think about taking the actions needed to, let's say, repair the assets, the slide with the 40 million or whatever it was. Or no, it's on this other
10?
sheet.
Yeah.
The infrastructure improvements. Given that those are on private land, what are the sort of funding recommendations when you're thinking about putting public money into a private asset? Are there any mechanisms through which we can kind of get guarantees if we're working in a public-private partnership like that, making sure that we're not making investments that's just going to profit a private firm, and that we're getting some guarantee on the back end
Yeah.
here.
And they're going to want the same thing, right? If there's private money invested in it, there's going to be, I think throughout the process, you determine whether there's a demand signal, right? You're going to need that predictive maintenance or the predictive revenue stream, right? I wouldn't recommend going out and spending $40 million to repair it with the hopes that somebody will come, right? Like in particular, I think one example off the top of my head is down in Mobile, Alabama, where, you know, the Navy partnered another partnership where they invested some funding in. There was some public money and private money, I believe, to create a shipyard down there. But they had a demand signal. The Navy had the demand signal that there would be work there. So I think it's critical before you do that is really figure out where the strategic priorities of the federal government are and whether you align or not. And if you align, how can you get some of those guarantees, as you put it? Am I answering the question?
Yeah, I think so.
It's hard because I know a lot of our conversation was, well, who's the first one to bite? You know, who's the first one to pull the trigger on the investment? And it's got to be a little bit of everybody taking some risk. So the federal government is no longer taking the entire risk. You know, so they want everybody to take a little bit of shared risk, but with the knowledge that everybody is, you know, rowing in the same direction, I guess.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And I appreciate that there aren't any real easy answers to that. I think, you know, what we saw with the dry docks was, you know, when these contracts go for, you know, a year at a time or 5 years at a time, but the bids don't go out, you know, it's difficult to make significant investment in an asset if you don't have a guarantee on the back end. And then from the federal government's perspective, I would imagine they wouldn't want to invest in the asset unless they knew that they would have access. There's almost every stakeholder is going to want to ensure that there's,
Predictability across the nation right now is struggling with all the shipyards. So that's what they're asking for from the federal government. And the Department of War has responded, you know, in changing the acquisition cycle to say these aren't trying to make more multi-year investments for repair or ship work rather than individual one-offs. So I think they're moving the acquisition more towards that. So I think there's a greater opportunity. But I think all these questions, you know, like I said, there's probably a dozen branches these recommendations can go, and that's, I think, one of the most critical pieces is to understand where you want to be, and then to start having these conversations with the senior leaders to see if there is alignment or not, or what the possibilities are.
Right, I appreciate that. All right, we have, okay, yeah, I was just going to say, I've lost my connection, so do we want to just go down the line? We'll go to Councilmember Palmares, and then, right now, okay, we'll go to Councilmember Palmares.
Thank you, and also thank you for your presentation, and also thank you for talking to me a lot. So I just want to identify a couple of issues and just make sure like we're all on the same track for all these things. So one of the things that I think should be a concern is whether Merritt Island and Vallejo in general has the energy infrastructure to meet the needs for advanced manufacturing. I'm also representing Vallejo when it comes to the green empowerment zone. And one of the largest issues was the energy infrastructure. If you look at the map of just megawatts and the South Bay, those sites for those warehouses, those boxes, the energy infrastructure is set up for that. In the East Bay and this part of Solano County, not so quite set up. So I think that's one of the things we have to kick the tires on is, you know, if we're really going to be serious about advanced manufacturing, do we first have the energy infrastructure to back that up? I appreciate you identifying the housing and berthing for the sailors. I know that was one of the major concerns, kind of made the news last year or earlier this year. So definitely, I think that needs to be part of our overall housing strategy, not to be complacent about it, but how can we do more to induce some of the housing for sailors? And I mentioned this at the last meeting, but also be cognizant of housing for all the ranks, right? So in any ship or cutter, there's going to be junior enlisted. And if they're single, they're not going to get a whole lot in BAH. And so that means they're not going to be able to afford that much. But they got to stay somewhere. So we have to be cognizant of what kind of housing that we could provide for everyone from and E2 to a 4-star. Well, maybe not a 4-star, but maybe a captain of a ship. So, at the last meeting, also, Councilmember Matias identified the need for some sort of TIF to encourage for whenever there's going to be that big, large firm or large employer firm to come to Vallejo and to Merritt Island. If they're going to come there, then that's an opportunity to have a TIF and use that revenue, their investment, to invest back into Merritt Island. You mentioned this before. I mean, gone are the days that the federal government is going to just pay for everything. We have to kind of meet them in the middle and show that we are serious. And I think part of showing that we're serious is that we are going to find all sorts of financing structure, infrastructure to kind of meet the federal government in the middle. Another thing that's part of this strategy that I think is really important, and not just so much for the workforce, but just in general, is we need to really embrace a cradle-to-career program. The mayor and I hunted you at the parking lot last meeting, but I think it's important. We need to really embrace that. There are a variety of versions of this out there, and I know we probably can't afford all the bells and whistles for our Cradle to Career program, but what can we do at least show that we're serious and we're helping our youth not only just get through school, but also prepare them for the workforce. There are examples out there, but I'm not going to go too deep into that right now. And then get into the media stuff. I totally agree with the one voice government model. We need to show a concerted effort to show that we are serious and that we're making a concerted effort to work on this. You mentioned the 501c4. This sounds very similar to what Vacaville did, the city of Vacaville did, where they seeded a nonprofit and that went into their biotech industry. We could do likewise. But I will also say that until then, we need to start making the initial moves to show that we are serious. So we don't have to wait for 501c3 or C4 or whatever, but we could and should establish a steering committee, working group, task force. I don't really care what you call it, but that coalition you mentioned, we could all meet up at any time. City of Vallejo, Merritt Island Company, so on and so forth, all the stakeholders. But to the mayor's point, that we need to have a real honest and dedicated conversation with the Merritt Island Company is like, okay, do you buy into the strategy? Also, what are you willing to do? Because it's one thing to say like, yeah, this sounds great, okay, but what does that actually look like right now? And once we establish that, we establish the vision, we establish the mission statement, and that leads directly into the nonprofit. It's important for us to do this kind of work right now because we want to stay ahead of the federal budget cycle, right? So thinking farther ahead, if we want those federal dollars, we have to start signaling right now that we are serious, and it's May, and so we don't have a lot of time. But any kind of working group or whatever to show that we're serious and provide that demand signal, the better. As I mentioned before, I'm also representing the City of Vallejo for the Green Empowerment Zone. So thinking more broadly, I think also this working group should, and I'm just going to name it, it's like a Merritt Island Maritime and Manufacturing working group or steering committee. Because for me, I think the opportunity is kind of diversifying our portfolio. Yes, it's shipbuilding. Yes, it's ship repair. Yes, it's defense manufacturing, but it's also plenty of room for the clean energy manufacturing. And these are the conversations we're having in North Contra Costa County and South Solano County. And so why not do both? And I think Vallejo is at a very unique position that we can double dip on this. And so why not? And yeah, and I look forward to when we actually start meeting and we can actually have a nonprofit or some sort of organization where we can over-communicate our seriousness and start branding ourselves as the place for shipbuilding, repair, advanced manufacturing, et cetera. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so folks may have noticed the captioning went in and out, and so I'm going to give our IT team, we're okay now? All right, we're going to proceed then down the line, and I'll just look to IT. If we do have issues, we will flag, because we want to make sure all of this gets properly recorded with the captions online. We'll just continue down the line, so we'll go to Councilmember Gordon.
I don't have any questions right now, but thank you so much for the conversation, the in-depth conversation. Just really wanting to know from our perspective of what our goals are for the city of Vallejo, what we would like to see with partnership in this opportunity. Both of you, you're very intentional, and I appreciate that. And I look forward to continue to learn more. And thank you for the correction of the naming, so I appreciate that too. But thank you. You both did an amazing job. You should be very proud of yourself.
Great. Vice Mayor Matulik.
Thank you, and thank you for that presentation. And listening to the general public out there, there's a lot of conversations of competition out there. And for us, with the new Collinsville that's coming out there's that competition of how are we better suited versus what Collinsville is doing. So I think from a marketing and from a development enhancement type of opportunity, we need to raise our game from how we're intentional about how we're moving forward. And a lot of the conversations we've had up to this, but that people have had with me up in this point, specifically about the Maritime Prosperity Zone, is the suggestion of looking, of partnering up. We talked about the public-private partnership, but there's a lot of other maritime sources around here, Benicia, Richmond, things of that nature, to where pooling our resources may give us a better talking points, so to say, if we're able to enhance our basic infrastructure, our capacity of how maritime works. And specifically here in Vallejo, a lot of the conversation I'm talking about, and we've kind of focused on Mare Island specific, but speaking to the public-private partnership, which was done over in Martinez when they started doing their waterfront enhancement there. We've got two sides that I believe we need to be talking about, is not only the Mare Island side, but the Vallejo city side also of that waterfront, and how can we enhance and utilize both sides of that for this potential here. So this is where I want to be able to advance some of these conversations to where they haven't gone to in some of these in the past. And so this is, and part of this comes to where, and I go back to the whole revenue generating type of thing where developers don't come here because they don't see the reason to. There's no purpose for, or in other words, we as a city haven't done enough to encourage development here. And I think once we're able to focus on something like this with the maritime and the shipbuilding, that'll definitely kickstart a bunch of stuff. So I think I would like to see, for me, it's more of a marketing type of enhancement of how do we get our message. We always talk about changing our narrative here in Vallejo, and I think this is a great starting point or talking point that we can enhance that conversation. And it's a matter of how we are intentional of how we're doing it. And I think utilizing the shipbuilding is a great point, but I think we need to be a little bit more nuanced, a little bit more sophisticated in how we're trying to do that. And I think utilizing your expertise, you can help lead us in some of those conversations and getting that out publicly. But I think that's the start of where I would like to do, is how we're actually marketing ourselves and knowing that we're quote unquote in a competition, pointing out that how we are the better choice versus others out there, and hopefully partnerships with other local maritime areas may be able to enhance our ability to speak to that maritime prosperity zone and things of that nature. So thank you for that.
Definitely agree. Can you mind if I comment? Yeah, so I think 100%. Like, I don't want to discount the waterfront on this side, right? You know, I think the message, as you start looking at, you need to be inclusive of the surrounding environment and utilize all the assets you can to create this ecosystem that's very broad and regional. I think, what we learned, and I didn't use this term first, but I've kept using it, as the hub and spoke model, is that Mare Island is the hub. It's ready now. It has ready assets now. This side of the waterfront, Collinsville, other places can be many spokes to where that hub is, but it starts with, if somebody wants to act now and has money now, Mare Island is the starting point, and just the starting point, right?
And I think that doesn't get enough conversation is that we're more established right now, where we have a transportation hub already with our ferry system, and where we've had the ports here in our dry dock right now. So I think that's where, hopefully, once again, that leads to advancing a lot of the conversations out there from a public perception standpoint and from a marketing standpoint, that we can take that conversation a little bit further. So thank you for that.
Thanks.
Yeah,
ACM Conley,
thank
go
you.
ahead.
Through the chair, I was just going to comment on that very thing, that, one of the things that this report actually highlights when you read the entire thing is really the emphasis on regionalism. As mentioned, there's a space for Vallejo. There's a space for Vallejo to go now, because we essentially do this work. But, when you look at that sort of wish list, I guess, of ships that the government is hoping to get over the next, 5, 6, 7 years, some of those we just can't build here. And so when you start thinking about the entire landscape, it will have to include Collinsville. It will have to include, obviously, Vallejo, Benicia, Antioch, Pittsburgh, potentially Sacramento, Stockton, Sausalito, Oakland, Richmond. It's the full range, right? So when you look at other areas, it's a region. It's not just a city. So, that sort of one place does it all isn't really a model that works anymore. So we're really looking to see what we can do now, both on Mare Island, because to the mayor's point, it's mostly privately owned. And so we want to help attract businesses there, because that will help benefit us, but it doesn't all have to be concentrated on Mare Island. So there is obviously space, as Councilmember Palmares mentioned, that they're housing over here, right? And then different types of housing potentially on Mare Island for home basing, right? Workforce development is huge. There's a lot of potential on mainland Vallejo side to build out housing, all levels of housing, to support increased workforce demands that this kind of investment will bring. As mentioned, the cradle to careers, we need to get into the schools, ensure that there's that partnership with a lot of the trade organizations, that the schools are supported in kind of teaching some of this so that they have that pathway either into trades or universities like Cal Poly or other places, right? There's also research and development. We're so close to Berkeley, Livermore Lab, and Silicon Valley, and there's just this huge opportunity for them to be on mainland Vallejo side. Not everything has to be located on Mare Island, but also, Benicia has a port. There's opportunities there for expansion. They have a proximity to a railroad over there, so we have a ton of piers that we can refurbish on our side as well as on Mare Island. So there's a lot of opportunity. And so, as mentioned, Vallejo can go now, but really to think about this as a piece of a regional approach. So that in Maritime Prosperity Zone, which is a little bit of a self-designation right now, but I repeat it and we use it in grant applications or when we're speaking about maritime revitalization, we just dig into that. And so I think that that's important, that as we talk about it, it's not just us as a solo event, because you're right, we'll be more attractive if it's us as a group. And so I think we just need to figure out what those formalized partnerships look like. And maybe it's not one giant one, but maybe it's one that focuses on the education piece, one that focuses on the legislation, DC advocacy piece, one that focuses on some other aspects, the financial plan. So there's a lot of different ways that we can structure this. It's good reading. It's hard, but it's good reading when you go through the entire plan. But it does talk about some of this, and it's flexible enough that we don't really know what the future is going to hold. So there's just some strategies that are presented that are more like theoretical. So it's kind of like, you know, if we ever end up here, this could potentially be things that we can do. Otherwise, there might be other pieces of this that we want to drill down on, especially the ones that focus on economic development. I mean, home basing is a potential game changer for us as a city. So what if that's where we want to focus on, in addition to sort of being part of these other conversations, what do we need to do to make ourselves attractive? What does our downtown need to look like? What do our business centers need to look like? Yes, what do our roads need to look like? You know, what do our school systems need to look like? Our parks, our infrastructure. So those are the things that we can really concentrate on our side of the landscape, and then still participate with Mare Island for the stuff, you know, that involved the ship assets.
Thank you for that. Yeah, completely agree, and we'll go over to Councilmember Bergenser to finish the line.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for the presentation, and thank you for meeting one-on-one with me when you were going through your process, because it was really informative. I had just, a lot of my questions were actually asked by Councilmember Palmares, but I wanted to get into depth a little bit further. You know, given that you know our landscape, and you know that we have structural deficit in the city, and we're working on that, where do you think we should invest first to get the biggest bang for the buck if we have limited resources? Where would you see that investment first and foremost needing to go to as part of this plan?
Yeah, thanks for that very difficult
And you're here to
question.
solve all of our problems, I know, so.
No, again, you can only control what you can control, going back to the point that was just raised with Mare Island. Like, you're not going to pump money into Mare Island right now. Going back to the energy problem, like you would want to partner with Mare Island to fix the electrical distribution, and how are they presenting that platform? Sure. I think your energy is focused on well, like those quality of life initiatives that were mentioned, but also I think the energy is best spent, and I say energy, dollars and time, because I think time is probably as much of a limiting factor as the financial model. Right. is going back to getting organized and working with the school districts and working with Cal Poly, because I think you have all the pieces in place. Like, a lot of the stuff we didn't make up, you have them in place, and there's a lot of tentacles out there of a lot of great conversations happening with whether it's Cal Poly, with Solano EDC and industry days, you know, focus around that marketing. I think that marketing plan and getting the word out there and being visible. Throughout this effort, you know, particularly on that basing side I talked about, well, you want to be on the menu for somebody to choose you. You're not on the menu right now for, like, the Navy or the Coast Guard to choose you. So what are those impact items that get you out there? It's the, you know, potentially approving, if there's maritime businesses that are trying to get in there now, what can you do to remove any barriers from them coming in? Or if there's stuff in the system, how can you help them with permitting? How can you get those across the finish line to show you can do the little things to bring in the bigger businesses then? Sure. But I think really organize the marketing and stuff. That's the low cost but high time. It takes a lot of time and effort to market and do that engagement effort.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And then realistically, what do you foresee we should be forecasting, budgeting for the next 3 to 5 years to be getting us more prepared for this realistically? Because obviously we don't have hundreds of millions of dollars to invest, but like what should we be putting aside or trying to put aside on a 3 to 5 year plan?
I don't know if I have an answer to that.
Okay.
I don't even think personally I can give you a recommendation.
Sure. Okay.
I apologize. Yeah.
Okay. Getting a little bit more into the housing, just to give us perspective, you know, if we were to, say, land the contract for whatever the ship name, I'm sorry, I'm trying to find that page that you talked about, the frigate. If we were to land that, like realistically, how many housing units would you say we need to have available for that purpose? Like, to have housing for, are we talking about 40 families? Are we talking about 400 families? Are we talking about thousands of families?
Yeah, so if you're talking, if you're, when you say land the contract, but to get a home port, you're talking to get a home port like a frigate. Yeah, I think you're looking between 100 and 300 different, folks coming. But I'll say this, you wouldn't just get one, right? So the idea is to get multiple. So I don't think they will. The Navy, neither the Coast Guard nor the Navy will say just station one. So you're trying to get multiple ones. So you have to factor that in the equation. But I think with the frigate, with the unmanned systems, with the 3 different classes of Coast Guard cutters, those are all on the smaller side in terms of ship's personnel. Like you're not getting the battle, even though a battleship may fit here, I don't think you want that. You don't want 700 people per battleship. So I think with those ship classes that we recommended are very viable in terms of the support facilities that are required for them. Because we did try and focus on multiple ships with a lower number of personnel on those ships.
Okay, thank you so much. That's all I have.
All right. Councilmember Matias, are you still good? All right. Well, I'll just kind of add a couple comments to the questions I asked earlier. I think, I appreciate I think part of why this discussion is shorter is because of how thorough this is and how much sense a lot of it makes for Vallejo. I think, it's worth saying again that Cal Poly, it feels like Cal Poly is the key partner here because not only are we fortunate enough to have the Maritime Academy, the only Maritime Academy on the West Coast, but we have this merger that has now, an integration that has now put us in a position where when budgets are getting cut and public institutions all over are having to make tough decisions, we have an institution that's ready to expand. And, I think the stars are really aligning right now for Vallejo. We don't have a lot to invest, but we do have partners that are ready to invest. And I think Cal Poly will be a willing an eager partner, but also something that will set us apart from the field. The fact that we have that maritime institution here, I mean, nobody else has that on the West Coast. So I was out there on Saturday for their commencement, and I think they're just now a year in to the integration, kind of getting settled in and ready to go. To the point about the industrial-based coalition, I think that's something too that our congressman has been eager to do in the regional piece that the assistant city manager was talking about. The congressman has been eager for months to kind of look at the regional approach and was almost very encouraged by our work here and almost kind of stepped back and said, hey, I want the city of Vallejo to lead this. But I think in partnership with the congressman, we can start building out that coalition and start getting momentum and start building those relationships. And if we have a unified vision, and particularly again with Mare Island Company, with the city and our various stakeholders, that then makes it easy for somebody like myself to go out and advocate, which I have expressed already that I'm more than willing to do, in as much as we feel like the right opportunities, the right return on investment and right opportunities are for us to build those relationships. And the other thing that I would add about the unified vision is that, we had a meeting last month technically, but last week about Mare Island, and I think finding meaningful ways as well to just ensure that the residents are engaged in the processes. Also, I have yet to see anything really in any of these plans that would fundamentally do anything more than what's already kind of being done with dry dock and the Coast Guard and things like that. But just making sure that everybody that's going to be impacted by this is on the same page, that's engaged, and we do have that unified front and unified vision when we go out and pursue these opportunities. So in terms of the sort of short-term next steps, I think we have, we're in a position now where time is of the essence. We also have a new city manager coming on board. So I think in the next, month or two, we'll probably be ready to take some actions. I don't know if it makes sense for us to have the conversation in the budget process, if it makes sense to have the conversation in goal setting. I don't think we should necessarily even really be deciding anything tonight, but I don't know, like ACM Conley do you have recommendations of when you think a good time to circle back to this is and set
So I would
direction?
say, through the chair, probably not necessarily through the budget conversation, but shortly thereafter. I think budget is one thing, but I think, the incoming city manager has a lot of experience with sort of different types of financing mechanisms. I think that I read that, he's done several in the billions, right? So there is opportunities for us to participate in that. So, that's kind of why you use those mechanisms, because, you may not have a lot of money in the bank, but money can make money in various ways. So I think that is something that's almost the easier question. I think the harder question is where to invest. Where do you want to invest that money? So it would be, is it downtown? Is it all through Vallejo? Is it infrastructure? So those probably might be a little bit harder conversations, or do you split the difference? So those wouldn't happen through the budget. I'd say you probably touch on it more through your goal-setting process. And then simultaneously, we could still, look into the different, financing mechanisms that we could potentially tap into to do some of this near-term, mid-term work.
Yeah,
I have a
thank you for
question.
that.
Good,
Yeah,
Chair.
I'll go ahead and do another pass. Then I see
Yeah.
Councilmember Gordon.
Thank you so much. So I remember when I first had the honors to serve the Vallejo last year, I did ask to bring this up. And so I'm glad that we took this on. And I definitely would like to remind everyone that we do have, in my district, from the PG boat dock launch, all the way to Carquinez. And we have all that valuable land, all that valuable water, and I just want us not to, remember I mentioned to you, we have to not only focus on Mare Island, but we have to focus on the inland as well. And the waterfront doesn't just stop right downtown. It goes all the way to the Carquinez Bridge. And so as we doing this work, we want to make sure that that partnership is considering that as well. The young man, he does a video for us, for Vallejo, and it just shows so much potential off that water, and I actually talked to both the superintendent and the CEO, president for Mare Island, Cal Poly Maritime Academy, and they will love that partnership as well. So I just don't want us all to forget that the reason why I brought this up last year, and I'm glad that we're taking it on, but we have to remember that this partnership has to be all 7 of us, not just only one of us. I feel it's important that I say that. Thank you.
All right. Anyone else? Do we want to? We'll go Councilmember Palmares, and then we'll do a pass at public comment again.
I have an idea, and maybe you can confirm if it's a good idea or not. So I think maybe one of the easy, low-hanging fruit that we could start to attack would be trying to solicit founders and firms as part of the autonomous maritime system industry. As mentioned in the report, there's a good number of them in the Bay Area, and we're right next door to Lawrence Livermore and Berkeley Lab. That just seems like an easy win for us in the short term. I mean, as we're doing this coalition, but I think that is easier to get to start to get going as far as like establish ourselves as one of among other things, a proving ground, establish that in Vallejo, and that could kind of like be the catalyst for all the bigger things like shipbuilding. But I feel that just eyeballing, it feels like trying to address or solicit those kind of firms for that the autonomous robotics maritime industry seems a little bit easier for us to do, and just say, hey, we got a proof of concept right here. So I don't know, but what do you think?
No, I don't disagree, or I should say I agree. There's a lot of wickets you have to get through to even do work on Navy ships, right? You have to have
Right.
certain certifications of the piers and to get those. So autonomous vehicles are the platform now, small, medium, and large, pick your size, right? So there's many folks out there developing them, and kind of understanding the market in this area would be a great investment in time to see what they need, what capabilities they need, because you may have them already, and they may just not know about them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think we could be the only place for manufacturing everything from A to Z as far as like whatever that platform is going to be. But we could definitely be part of the supply chain, right? As we mentioned before, I want us to be the region of choice. And maybe Vallejo's, we could be really good at making this widget for an autonomous system.
Yeah,
And
and
meanwhile,
that's-
Fairfield could be this, and Benicia could be that, And so, sorry.
That's a
go
great
on.
point. I'm glad you brought that up. I was going to mention it before, but supply chain, maritime prosperity zones, this whole ecosystem, it does not have to be building an entire ship. There's going to be maritime prosperity zones inland that are critical to the supply chain of creating those national security assets. So.
Great. Okay, thank you.
All right, we're going to do one more pass of public comment, and it sounds like we have someone in person.
Yes, it appears that our technology is up and running now. We have one person signed up, and it looks like Sherry Ann Grimm.
And through the mayor, as she approaches the podium, we do have one member of the public signed up online.
I signed up before the mayor spoke. So first of all, thank you for remembering the resident stakeholders. When I read the report, I picked up a lot of the same things that City Manager Conley just mentioned and the more regional nature. But as I was listening to you tonight, there were a couple of comments that really made me wonder as a resident, what would the impact be? So when you say things like the federal government, gave away their land and they might want it back, that's a really big statement for people that are living there that bought into a specific plan 20 years ago that keeps changing, and now this plan is significantly different. So if you could just speak to that so that residents kind of figure out what that all means to the established neighborhoods out there, and also just remember that the stakeholders are out there, and things go better when things are done with people than to people. So that would be my point.
Yeah, thank you for bringing, and my statement is completely false. So the federal government does not want the land back. My point in that is that it's an asset that can enhance national security, that is vital and can be vital to the future of our national security in one way or another. Not going back to the World War II era of stuff, but yes, thank you for bringing that up. There is no effort from the government to come back in and make it a public shipyard again. So I think there's plenty of compatible uses, and I 100% agree with you too about it's finding the right manufacturing, autonomous vehicles, what have you, that it fits into the plan out there with the residents in mind as well. And yeah, this is created for, again, a menu to kind of voice your opinion, and thank you for voicing that, because that's something that's critical in this next phase, as to how do you get to the ones that are where the city wants to go, and the members want to go. So.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. We took a little liberty with the public comment format that we appreciate the response from you, Nate, on that. And you are all good. Yeah, you are all, it worked out. It worked out. There was time remaining on the clock, and it worked out perfectly. Why don't we go ahead and call our online speaker?
Okay, online speaker Ann C., please unmute yourself. You have the floor.
Let's see. Hi, can you hear me? Please confirm.
Yes, we can.
Please. Okay, thanks so much. So I am glad to hear about the idea of a plan. And I have to say, as a native Vallejoan of a certain age who was born and raised here decades ago, I'm skeptical, I guess, is bottom line. I would love for us to have some revitalization and to rebuild in any capacity. This particular discussion would have been great to have like 40 or 50 years ago before the base was shut down. But I see some significant obstacles, and so I just want to raise these so that we aren't all starry-eyed. And the first one is the category of show me the money, because if we had lots of money, then all kinds of things would be possible. The second category has to do with very outdated facilities that need both remediation and upgrading, and which the Navy itself had not wanted to take on when they decided to close the base. And as we have seen the sad history, for the most part, the private sector has not wanted to take on the remediation either, because it's cheaper for them to locate and build a brand new tilt-up building than to remediate and upgrade a building and then customize it for their use. The third and fourth things that I worry about are number three, the state of partisan politics right now. And frankly, what I see is efforts at personal enrichment and personal retaliation on the part of the administration, which would puts California in a very bad situation here with respect to any sort of federal support. And really, the feds are going to be the ones largely that have the big money, because the big infrastructure kinds of investments are going to be very hard for private sector to take on. And then the last thing I will say is that when the base was really just about naval operation, you didn't have to worry about the intersection and maybe collision between residential needs and industrial needs. And with, tying back to the mayor's comments and Sherry Ann Grimm's comments, we now have this uneasy balance. And so the city and Mare Island Company are going to need to be very clear about creating a buffer zone really between industrial and residential, because you have a big residential investment. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other commenters online?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. We do have one more speaker. Jay, please unmute yourself. You have the floor. Jay, please unmute yourself. You have the floor.
Okay, can you guys hear me now? Can you give me some quick confirmation?
Yes,
Yes.
we can.
Hi. So I'm Jay. I actually ended up moving here ages ago because my father was a part of the military. So I'm an original Navy brat back from when Mare Island was active and the other naval bases in the area were here. And thankfully, a lot of what I was going to say was just said by the woman before me. So I appreciate that. Namely, the conflict that the federal government isn't really a big fan of California, and that a lot of the big money contracts that would revitalize our shipbuilding here probably won't come to us. And then she did also touch on something else about when it was purely for the government's need here, we didn't have to worry about public and private usage. But then if we're going to be having a private sector shipbuilding, then we have to kind of consider the two sides of that coin. And another thing is that I'm also considering what sort of environmental impacts that would have. Shipbuilding, I think, has a pretty good impact on the air quality. And, I love Vallejo, but I also like breathing. So that would be good to keep being able to do. That's really all I've got to say.
All right, thank you very much. Anyone else online? All right, we will close public comment, and if we don't have any other final comments from council, we will thank, again, Roosevelt Group. We will look forward to following up on this in the near future. Just really appreciate you coming out and all the work you put into this and all the stakeholders that contributed to it as well.
Great, thank you so
So,
much.
yeah, thank you very much. So with that, why don't we take a 10 or 15-minute recess, and then we will start the budget. Do we want to start the budget at 6:30, or do we want a little more time? I'm looking around. Let's start the budget at 6:30, so we'll come back in just almost exactly 10 minutes. All right, 30-second warning. We're going to get started. All right, we're almost all back, so why don't we go ahead and resume, and we're going to head over to our budget item 3B. I'll ask our city clerk to announce item 3B.
Presentation of overview of fiscal year 26-27 budget development process and baseline budget. Direction to staff relating to balancing considerations and revenue generation options.
All right, thank you very much. So we'll open up public comment on this item, and we will do it similarly to last time. So we'll take the staff presentation, and then we'll take comments in person and online in this item. And I will go ahead. I was hoping we'd have Councilmember Gordon back. I'm trying to speak slowly. Yeah, I will speak. We'll just start slowly, and we'll hopefully not get any of the nitty gritty until she's back. But I'll go ahead and turn it over to our acting city manager who has relocated and will be presenting the budget item along with our finance team.
Yes. Thank you, Mayor, City Council members. I can do a quick intro to give the councilwoman time to get back to her seat. So this evening, we'll be going through sort of the first ever presentation of the fiscal year 26-27 budget. You've seen most of this information in different iterations, primarily as sort of the add-on to the mid-year request that you heard several times. This one is a standalone, and this also includes a lot of the budget balancing options that we had previously discussed, but it also includes some potential revenue generating options as well. Also included, you'll see an overview of Measure P items, and as we get through this, we'll walk through the structure. So I see all of you here, so I think we can start with the presentation. So, okay. Yes, so we have a pretty comprehensive presentation. I'm gonna not rush through it, but go through it somewhat timely so we can have a robust discussion as we get through. And this is the general outline of the presentation. We're going to go over the budget development process. We're going to talk and present the baseline projection. We're going to review the budget deficit and balancing strategies. And then we're going to go over Measure P, the Measure P status, and then the 26-27 year staff requests. And one of the things that I'd like to highlight is this is just really a presentation focused on the general fund. It's not the entirety of our budget, primarily because general fund is where we have the most vulnerability right now, and this is where we really have the issues of our structural deficit. So our budget policy, as per city charter, requires that the city manager submits a proposed budget to council 45 days before the fiscal year begins. One of the issues that we're having here is timing. So as you can imagine, today is the 5th, and 45 days before the fiscal year begins is the 15th of this month, so 10 days away. So that's not really enough time for you to really give feedback per se on the budget balancing options. And also considering that we have a new city manager starting in less than 2 weeks, he'd also like to weigh in on the budget balancing strategies. So what's going to happen is we are going to present a balanced budget just based on our sort of best estimations of how to address the deficit so that we can actually balance it as we're required by charter. And then what we will do is we'll go through the amendment process to then, consider any sort of feedback from the incoming city manager, from council. We're going to agendize the budget on I'm forgetting the second date, but June 9th, and I believe the second date is the 23rd. So that we can have additional opportunities to discuss and get feedback, and then we can sort of present on what those amendments will look like. We had set aside, I think, June 2nd as a potential special meeting, but I don't think, considering the incoming city manager doesn't start until the 18th, that we're going to have enough time to get his feedback and direction and then be able to do all those updates and calculations and then bring it back by the 2nd. So we're just going to stick with those other 2 dates in June. And if necessary, I think the city clerk is going to potentially poll for June 30th if for some reason we can't adopt the budget at the 23rd meeting in June. So something else to point out is that the general fund proposed expenditures shall not exceed the estimated revenues. So we do have to present a balanced budget, and then, as stated here, estimate revenues include any surpluses from the current year. So we do carry those forward if they exist. So just to go over our traditional budget development process, as stated earlier, we established a baseline budget. This is what we use to build the foundation. We use the prior year ongoing expenditures and revenues as a starting point. Then we incorporate the department budget requests. So finance staff does the Herculean task of meeting with all the departments. They submit their requests for new funding needs and or adjustments. There was direction to staff to try to cut their expenditures as much as possible going forward. And then, as stated here, we have the proposed budget by May 15th, and so we will publish that and present it to City Council. And then hopefully within that time frame, we will, probably use one of the June regular meetings to do sort of more of a workshop, although I think it's just going to be a regular meeting. We're still also looking into potentially having a community budget meeting, but timeline might mean that we actually will have to do something close to budget adoption or maybe in the new fiscal year as we're still going through this process if that's necessary. So as stated here, it's an iterative refinement and adoption process. And so we'll just keep going at it until we end up with a budget that you all agree is reflective of your priorities and reflective of what you feel is fiscally responsible for the city. So as stated today, there's a couple things that we like to receive your direction on, primarily focused on the revenue generating options. Primarily because, as stated before, we have a new incoming city manager, and he would like to be able to review a lot of the budget balancing options. So while they're in this proposal and presentation, we're just sort of go through it because those are the things that we're going to use to balance the budget, but it doesn't mean that these are actually going to be the final adjustments that we make or considerations, because he may have some other ideas or approaches. And then, as mentioned, we're really working hard to figure out how to schedule this community budget workshop. We've talked to several folks in the community trying to figure out the best way to structure that meeting. So as soon as we're able to figure out a date that works where we can, potentially have maybe some other options for community to make it so that they can attend, we'll bring that forward. So one of the things that we did, our methodology to deal with this baseline budget, was that we started with what was adopted last year for the 25-26 budget. During that process, I believe there was a 20% cut for services and supplies. So just as a starting point, we add that back. We also apply a 3% inflation factor. And then we remove all one-time revenues and expenditures. So just keep in mind, this is just to start. And then what we do is we'll make any further adjustments based on any potential agreements or inflation or contractual obligations that happen that we have to incorporate. So to go over the baseline budget, first we're going to start with revenue. And so our revenue projections are prepared individually for each revenue source. The assumptions and source data vary by category. So we have property tax, sales tax, business license projections, which are provided by HDL. That's correct, right? And so the property taxes, which include the motor vehicle license fee, includes a 2% increase, primarily due to an annual CPI adjustment. Sales and transaction use taxes, 1% increase due to ongoing inflation, high interest rates, fuel price volatility, and uncertainty in the global economic market. But then we do see a 7% decline in business licenses. This is more in alignment with actuals received in fiscal year 24-25 and 25-26. And we also know that current economic factors are having a depreciating impact on people's habits and the way that they spend money, because more money is going to necessities than discretionary funds. So all other unrestricted revenues are based on average prior year trends, anticipated rate adjustments, and or contractual increases. So something like the UUT, the utility user tax, we're seeing a 9% decline, which is reflecting reduced usage in electric and gas, as well as the shift towards a lot of streaming platforms versus using things like cable or the dish or direct TV. Although I read somewhere that trend might be changing because people are tired of having too many subscriptions to keep track of. So we'll see if that actually bears itself out. Then there's the TOT, the transient occupancy tax. We're seeing a 9% decrease. I think our folks from Visit Vallejo mentioned that they're seeing a declining market there, just because of the ongoing economic uncertainties. The franchise tax, that increased by about 8%. That's just because there's been rate increases on garbage, electric, and gas use, as I'm sure you have all noticed. And then there's a 16% net decrease on our other revenues, primarily due to shifting the OPEB trust reimbursement to the Retiree Health Fund in fiscal year 26-27. So we've also noticed that cannabis tax has declined, real property excise tax has gone down, rentals, investment income, water rights, Six Flag Park fee, and then some other transfers from other funds have all decreased to result in that number. And program revenues are developed and provided directly by the individual departments based on expected activity levels. So those would be things like fees associated with permitting, potential code enforcement. There's fees, I believe, that are reported through Water and Public Works and Fire Department. So if a department actually collects revenue, then they work with us, and during the budget process, they report what their estimated revenues are, and we incorporate that into our budget. So this is our general fund unrestricted revenue for fiscal year 26-27. As you can see by line item, property tax is up slightly. The property tax in lieu of the motor vehicle license fee is up slightly as well. Sales tax, transaction and use tax, which is our measure B, up very slightly, 1%. But things like the UUT, TOT is down, as well as business license tax and other, as mentioned before. So the property transfer tax is up slightly, 1%. We're going to actually revisit that later on in this presentation. But as you can see, overall, revenues are down by about $1.35 million. So 1% overall. So these are the actual program revenues that I mentioned. So economic development, fire, police, public works. They report their revenues, and these are what they estimate for the 26-27 years. So it is slightly up. You'll see that economic development has reported sort of the largest gain there, 18%. And then down below, we also have Measure P revenue, which we expect to be up slightly, which we account for separately than our general fund revenues that you see that that's up as well. But overall, our program revenues are down slightly by 1%. So this is just showing the trends in revenue since 2016-17 fiscal year. You'll see that for a number of years from 21 through 24-25, we received several $1 million in ARPA funds. That finished in 25-26. And you'll see that Measure P revenues have remained somewhat flat. And then, that means that the rest of our revenues sources as well has pretty much remained flat over the last year or so. Down from 24-25, but that's when we also received a fairly large portion of ARPA money. So now we go to our expenditures. So for the expenditure projections, finance develops the baseline expenditure projections similar to what we do for revenue. We look at labor costs, non-labor costs, including services and supplies, as well as debt service, transfers and subsidies. We also do the citywide cost allocation plan, which is our indirect rate, which we apply to all departments to essentially support general services. And then we have the workers' compensation rate and general liability contribution. Public Works, they do their fleet allocation cost and vehicle replacement schedules, engineering staff time reimbursements from capital projects, and then maintenance division allocation charges to other funds. And then all departments verify their baseline assumptions, and then they submit requests for modifications. And then due to the projected shortfall, departments were directed not to submit new funding requests for the 26-27 budget cycle. So part of what the general fund assumptions are includes salaries and benefits. And so salaries here, the cost calculated for each position. Obviously, overtime is primarily budgeted for VPOA and IFF employees with as we mentioned before, a 3% cost allocation. And then the benefits, pension, there's health and welfare benefits, and then other benefits including workers' compensation, Social Security, and Medicare. There's also leave payouts. That's when someone retires. We have some historical trends, and so we made some adjustments for what we normally budget in that area, and then any potential labor cost increases, we include that as well. So I know that there was some conversation several meetings ago about pension liabilities. So this is our summary as of June 2024 for our valuation report. We have normal costs, which is the current year benefit cost, and then we have an unfunded accrued liability, which is what we pay towards our pension obligations. So the miscellaneous plan essentially covers everyone but safety. As you can see, the employer normal cost is about 10.25% before any employee cost sharing, and our contribution to that is $11.81 million, and our unfunded pension liability for miscellaneous plan is $125.5 million. For safety, the employer normal cost is 20.67%. We do a $21.17 million annual contribution, and the unfunded accrued liability is $232.8 million. And then our PARS Pension Trust Fund is about $25.57 million as of March of this year. So this is a slide that shows our revenues and our expenditures and really shows what the challenge is when we say we have a structural deficit here. So In this model, we're looking at fund balance, carryover, and then we're also looking at all of our revenues that we're expecting for 26, 27, and then our expenditures. And this is, keep in mind, without any adjustments. So this is just baseline. This is without any sort of balancing measures, cost reduction measures. This is just straight up if we just do everything in our budget as usual. So as you can see, based on, you know, our fund, incorporating our fund balance with the revenues and expenditures, that's our deficit. And if we used our fund balance to budget, we'd have approximately, was that $20,000? So we're not recommending that, but that's just to show you the scale of the issue. So one of the things we also wanted to highlight, because this came up, I think, several meetings ago as well, was the Board and Commission's funding request. So for those that came before you, and what we've incorporated into the baseline is approximately $82,000. The full total of the requests by the boards and commissions with regards to their work plan is about $329,000. So obviously that's a huge gap. And then there's essentially of the Cultural and Arts Commission's $218,000 ask, $134,000 ask is made through Measure P funds. I don't know, did they go? Not yet. I believe that might go for the 11th, on the 11th. So obviously this is something that council needs to consider because we've not really had or revisited that sort of boards and commissions conversation about providing them with a budget for their work plan. But we just wanted to give you what the ask is so that you can kind of think about, you know, what potentially you wanted to fund or what you didn't want to fund. And then you also know what has potentially been incorporated into baseline. So as of March 10th, our estimated budget deficit was $29 million. As of May 5th, we've did a slight revision. It's about $28.5 million. We did have some revenue decreases from that last time. We did shift some costs related to the OPEB trust reimbursement to retiree health fund. That was about a $1.3 million shift. And then, you know, there's a $920,000 discount related to a lump sum payment. So rather than reinvesting that, I believe we're using that to help balance the budget, or the deficit, I should say. We removed $1.5 million in services and supplies because the mid-year request was not approved. So, but we also had a transfer increase of about $700,000 for the litigation deposit fund. We also made some interfund reimbursement increases of about $1.5 million. So this is just a broad overview of the balancing strategy. The next slide goes into a little bit more detail. Let's just go into that. So here we are. I'm not going to really spend too much time on the sort of staffing piece of things because the sort of expenditure control options are the things that the incoming city manager wants to be able to weigh in on. Just know that you can see it here. These are some of the things that we had considered. Some of this was presented in prior discussions at the direction of council. But again, as I mentioned, you know, the budget process is iterative, so this will definitely change over time, especially once the new city manager comes on board. The use of reserves, one-time measures, this may change as well. So I'll just point out that you know, some of this is, you know, proposing shifting some costs to Measure P that are applicable, and we can go into that later. The potential use of Monsanto funds, $1 million for Monsanto funds, and then using fund balance. So that's less than what we've used in prior years, but that would still be an option. But again, that would be about $7.3 million for the use of one-time measures. But again, something that we want to bring before the incoming city manager, so just hold that as a placeholder for right now. I think for this evening's conversation, to kind of distill it down, we're looking for thoughts and feedback on the revenue enhancement portion. So let's get there. But I will just say that if you are supportive of us looking into the revenue enhancement portion, potentially, right, if this is the way forward, we could more than address the actual deficit. So there is a way to get there. And then obviously without the revenue enhancements, we can still get there. The revenue enhancements kind of push us over the top and put us into the black, which would be a good place to be. So again, as I mentioned, I'm not going to go into this because, again, we were asked to sort of pause this portion of the position reduction strategy and allow the incoming city manager to weigh in on that strategy when he arrives in about 2 weeks. So I will go over the participatory budget project just because it was in the sort of budget balancing piece as potential area of reduction. And the reason why we bring this forward is because staff went through and balanced and reconciled multiple cycles of participatory budgeting, and there were several projects that were not green-lighted. They weren't fully funded, and so they were not actually able to move forward. And once we reconciled sort of all the different cycles, we realized that there's about $730,000 left that can be allocated. So it's not necessary to provide money in the budget for 26-27 to fund participatory budgeting, since there's still money in that fund. So something to consider, as we have these conversations moving forward. And it's typically more than what you funded in the past. So I think their funding level has been about $500,000. So that would leave about $200,000+ to potentially use elsewhere if council so decides. So one of the things that we have been thinking and talking about in terms of generating additional revenue is looking at the property transfer tax. So currently, as a charter city, we have the ability to raise our property transfer tax rate. General law cities have it set at, I believe it's 1.1, is it 1.10? 1.10 per $1,000. Ours currently is set at $3.30 per $1,000 of property value. So for 26-27, we're estimating about $2.47 million. Now, there is an opportunity to raise the property transfer tax rate, and you'll see on the next, maybe 2 slides after, that looks at other charter cities, and so we can compare some of those rates. But we have potentially 3 options to consider. So there's option A, option B, option C. So option A is a moderate increase between $7 and $10. Option B is a tiered approach. So up to $1 million, it would be $5 per $1,000 property value. Between $1 million and $3 million, $10, and then $3 million plus, it would be $15. Or we could simply go for the option C, which is the higher value, which is just a flat $15. So that would mean that we have an example at the bottom. If you were looking to purchase a $500,000 home, this would be the impact. So currently you'd pay about $1,650. For option A, it would be between $3,500 and $5,000. Option B, the tiered approach, it would be $2,500, or option C, it would be $7,500. So it does add on to the cost of a home, but the city of Vallejo has some of the cheapest housing prices in the county, and Solano County has some of the cheapest housing prices in the region. So just something to consider in terms of context. So this is potential projected revenue by the rate. So we have the current rate, as mentioned, at $3.30, essentially generating about $2.4 million annually. The sort of moderate increase would generate for a full year about 5.9 to 7.3 million. These won't go into effect until January. So we're really looking at about a half a year of it. So for the first year in 26-27, it would generate about 1.75 to 2.45. So we don't necessarily see a change from our current rate with the 6 months. However, for the next full year, you would see that 5.9 to 7.3 range. And then if we go for the higher rate, then we see a big difference. So we would see a big difference from being enacted from January through June, so that would be about 4.25 million. And then over a full year, we see it be about $10.9 million. Now there's key deadlines that, to put a measure on the ballot, because this is what would be required. So, now through June, we'd have to set the rate, the structure, do the revenue estimates, have legal review. Council would have to approve in a pretty tight timeline. You'd have to approve the ordinance, do the ballot question, vote to place on the ballot. And then we'd have to file by the county by early August, which is a very hard deadline, and then it would need majority vote. So, there's no guarantee, right, because you leave it up to the voters, but this is, one option to put forward to consider. So this is what I mentioned before. This is the chart by some of the other charter cities that have a structure different than the 1.10 rate that general law cities adopt. So as you can see, it varies. What isn't here is the revenue generated. I think Los Angeles, or was it San Jose? It might have been San Jose was the highest. It's something like $2 to $3 billion annually. So, the higher the home value, it's potentially a huge revenue generating source for a lot of cities. So we're on the lower end, lower middle end of things, and so it's not out of the range here for us to consider raising our property transfer tax rate. So there are other things to consider here. The fee schedule was brought before council several months ago. We're still working on some revisions and plan on bringing that back. And so with adoption, this has the potential, as well as generating some revenue based on those fees. As you can see here, building fees, planning fees, fire prevention fees. If implemented, they can generate revenue. And then there's some other things to consider: parking enforcement. And then for code enforcement, there's been a lot of movement for cities within our region: San Jose, Berkeley. I think San Francisco already has something adopted, but Oakland, where they're really trying to change behavior of folks who are allowing their properties, both residential and commercial, to become derelict and become a problem for cities. I believe it's San Jose that just recently implemented something where residential properties, 4 units or less, are being fined $10,000 a month, and commercial between $25,000 and $30,000 a month for their derelict buildings, just to really prompt a change in behavior, because the normal fees and fines that were being assessed weren't doing it. And so people, they make the calculation for the benefit that they get, the tax benefit, to just not do anything, and the cities have been suffering. So they're looking to prompt a change and generate revenue at the same time. So that is something that we can look into. We can potentially model what that looks like, bring back an option or two if council so directs. Then there's the parking enforcement. So there's options there. I know it could be simply enforcement of the existing meters, or it could be something like you can have residential parking permits. And that just looks different depending on how you want to roll that out. I know Berkeley has something in place where different neighborhoods have residential parking permits They don't actually pay for them. You're allotted a certain amount for every residential household, and then you can only park for a certain period of time if you don't have that permit, and then you are assessed a parking ticket or a fee. Now, there is actually another revenue generating option. I'm going to look at the city attorney, because I don't know if you want to weigh in on the UUT piece.
I can do that. Council, you did receive an email about the option to collect with no ordinance change what I will call utility user tax on streaming services within the city. We are wondering if the council is interested in pursuing that. We have not looked at what that revenue stream would look like because we don't have the number of subscribers at this point. We could, generally estimate it. We do have outside counsel that has worked on these tax issues before, and if the council is interested, then when we come back with some of these options, we can also come back with sort of that cost-benefit analysis of what we think we might be able to collect, and then on an ongoing basis what that looks like, because obviously the expenditures are one time, but the ongoing revenue is ongoing. So interested in adding that to the mix of potential revenues. It would, go up or down over time depending on the number of streaming subscribers that there are within the city.
Thank you. So onward, so the next item is we're going to talk about the Measure P fund status, and that includes the fiscal year 26-27 staff requests. So before I jump into this item, what direction was given to all departments was to look at their expenditures and then look to see whether or not they qualify potentially to be funded through Measure P. So as you know, Measure P is obviously separate from the general fund. It has 9 priority areas: maintain critical city services, maintain fire protection, maintain emergency medical response, maintain crime prevention, address homelessness, address blight, address dumping, repair deteriorating neighborhood streets, roads, and sidewalks, and youth priorities. That 9th one was adopted per resolution in 22 by City Council. So staff was directed to look at all their expenditures and see whether or not those fit under those guidelines and whether or not they could potentially qualify to be funded by Measure P. That resulted in quite a few items being taken to the Measure P committee. So they had their first go-round on April 30th. There were, I believe, 20 items scheduled to be heard. There were a number, I believe we got through about half of those items. So on this next page, oops, sorry. Let me go through here first before I get into that. So the estimated beginning balance of Measure P for July 1st is about $7.25 million. That actually might need a little adjusting because I believe some other expenses might have hit since then. However, there is the $1.5 million that was obligated in this current fiscal year for public works items. I believe that was for the Bay Trail, Vine Trail maintenance. We estimate that the 26-27 tax revenues will be approximately $17.9 million. There's about $500,000 of interest that we expect to earn off of that. And so for the 26-27 fiscal year, we expect the balance of Measure P, if we don't have any expenditures, to be about $24.17 million. So for the 26-27 fiscal year, these are broadly the department requests. So fire has about $5.35 million worth of asks going to Measure P. Police about 1.75. Human resources about 600,000. Economic development about the same. IT about 2.3 million, and public works about 1.5 million. That's actually increased slightly, but to give you a sense, it's about 12 to $13 million. So as I mentioned, there was several items that were taken to the Measure P Oversight Committee on April 30th. These were the ones that received recommendations to forward to City Council by the Measure P Committee. So it's approximately $4.1 million for fire, but for the fiscal 26-27 year, it's $1.5 million. So some of these requests are multi-year requests, so we're just indicating what was approved for the 26-27 year, and then we have the remainder bunched for out years. And so what that will do is it will provide some shift from the general fund to the Measure P fund. So you can see that over to the far right. So for the items approved by fire, some of this is deferred maintenance, some of this is ongoing costs that are applicable. And so you'll see that there's a shift from the general fund to Measure P of about $750,000. Same thing for police. You'll see that the overall amount that was funded was about $4.6 million. For the 26-27 fiscal year, it's about $2.1 million. And then for the remainder of the years, it's about $2.5 million. So these were the two items that were not funded by the Measure P Oversight Committee so far. So you see that there was a homelessness item that was taken, and that was about $400,000. And then we took an item that asked for funding for executive level recruitment services, and that was about $170,000. So the next, I believe it's one. The next two slides cover most of the remaining asks for the Measure P committee. They will be heard on this coming Monday on the 11th. So we do have several more HR items to go forward. You'll see the totals there, some for economic development, IT, public works, police, and fire. So the total remaining that still need to go forward is approximately $10.31 million. I sent to the council, it was last minute, but all the items that were previously funded at the last meeting on the 30th, the ones that were not funded, you could see those staff reports. And then sent you all the staff reports for the items that are going to be heard on the 11th, just so that, you know, council, if you'd like to provide some feedback, if you feel like some of these things should not be heard by Measure P, we can bring that forward to the chair and vice chair of that committee. I don't know if we can change the agenda, but we can definitely bring that forward and let them know that there's some items that council has pulled for their consideration. So just wanted to bring that forward. And that is the end of this presentation. I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you for your time.
Right, yeah, thank you very much for the presentation. Before we get to questions from council, why don't we go ahead and take public comment on the item? We'll start with in person.
At this moment, Mayor, no one has signed up on this side for this item.
Through the chair, it seems Ms. Grimm is signing up in the back if she wants to just come down to the podium.
Yeah, why don't you just come down? And then do we have anyone online at this time?
Through the chair, we currently do not have any members of the public signed up to speak online at this time.
Thank you.
Or, never mind, we do have one.
We will get them after Ms. Grimm.
Good evening. I may have missed it, but when the page on board and commission funding came up, there's no funding for POAC. So if somebody could let us know if that's buried in somebody else's budget, or because that will be more of a significant budget ask, I think. Thanks.
Thank you. Let's go ahead and call the online speaker.
Thank you. Our first online speaker, Rebecca Trumper. Allowed to talk. Oh, okay. Never mind. Ann Carr. Please click on Ann Carr. You have the floor. Ann Carr, please unmute yourself. You have the floor.
Hello? Okay, there we are.
Yep.
So I understand we have constraints, et cetera. But I think that one thing I'd like to see the city take a look at is maybe selling off some of its assets With this, I'm thinking of property that the city decided to acquire because, gosh, it was such a bargain. We went through a couple years there where we were picking up some of the schools from the school district because, gee, there's just too cheap to resist it. And then it turns out there were all kinds of expenses for safety and security around them. So that's an obvious source of property to look at to divest ourselves of that and maybe let the private sector come in on that. And then the big item in my mind would be to look at selling 400 Mare Island Way. Now, I understand that it's used as collateral right now for the city's former bankruptcy loan, but I think you need to look at putting something else on that list for collateral and looking at selling that. I mean, even if we sold it for what we purchased it by, that would be a big swing in the budget of at least 13 million. Even if we had to take a small loss, it could be a significant uptake. And certainly that would be more revenue than some of the itty bitty little swings we're looking at pinching pennies here and there. So I hope the city will take a look at that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Moving on to our next speaker, Rebecca Trumper. Please unmute yourself. You have the floor.
Thank you. This is Rebecca Trumper, District 5 resident, 26-year District 5 resident. I think my comment is about the assumptions going into budgeting, that the budgeting, again, has started with the previous year adopted budget. But in order to not continue faulty assumptions or ineffective spending, it might be more effective to start with zero-based budgeting. So starting with the revenue that's available, not last year's expenditures, and combining that with priority-based budgeting, which aligns community needs and the higher value services with the revenue that's available. And also combined with outcome-based budgeting. So really deciding at the council and city leadership level and the community level what the desired or expected results are, and deciding that first, and then deciding which of the budgeting options are going to deliver those outcomes. So I think we have pretty clear idea of what the community's priorities are. It sounds like it's roads all the time, but I think it's really about economic development, continuing to invest in public safety, dealing decisively with the issues of why so many people in Vallejo are unhoused and what we're going to do about equitable housing going forward. And I also want to comment that part of the budget presentation was about revenue declines, that seems to be the trend, but I think that the declines in revenue point to a need for investment in economic development efforts, and not to continue shortchanging our budget, but instead invest in creating more revenue options for Vallejo. Thank you for your time. Thanks for listening.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else online?
Through the mayor, do not have any other speakers at this time.
Wonderful. All right. With that, we will go through, and I think, I want to thank again the acting city manager / assistant city manager / acting finance director for the work on this and sort of reinforce what you said at the beginning, which is that we do have an interim city manager coming in who starts in less than 2 weeks, who has expertise in fiscal management. And so although it is a tight timeline, it is in our best interest to give him an opportunity to look through this. And so I kind of want to name and state that, at least from my part, to the community, that obviously this isn't an ideal budget timeline that any of us would have chosen, but given the situation we're in and given that we do have the new city manager starting, this is going to be our best option to set us up going forward with the foundation that the finance team has already built. So given that we're sort of staying put for now and waiting for the new city manager to weigh in. I feel like we should go down the line as we did before and maybe have council members ask any questions or add any notes that they want to raise at this stage in the process, knowing that we're going to be coming back to this again in the coming weeks. And since we don't have lights, I will go down whatever line we want to go down. I don't want to call out either of the people at the ends, but if anybody wants to start, we can just start and we can rotate from there. You want to go ahead, Councilmember Bergenser?
Thank you. I just have a couple questions. Sorry. I just had a question about the 920,000, the discount for the pension payment. If we don't reinvest that, does that mean we won't have that discounted amount for next year? Is that part of that process for getting the discount, is reinvesting that discount back into the pension fund? Does that make sense? If we don't, you said you were going to take it and not reinvest it into the pension fund like we normally do. Will that mean that we won't get the discount next year?
No, you get the discount by prepaying. So if we
prepaying,
choose to, if we choose to, I think we've.
So it's not a certain amount that you have to prepay?
We've been doing that for multiple years. Prepaying to get the discount.
Yes.
Yeah.
But we're not, so it's not a certain dollar amount that you have to prepay? Like that 920,000 isn't going to affect the total amount we're prepaying? Because didn't we usually calculate that discount back in as part of our prepayment for the next year?
That I don't know. I don't think that, no, the amount that we have to prepay is calculated on the total amount.
Right, but I think we always calculated that.
We'll have to check on that.
That discount amount that we reinvest for next year is part of that discounted.
Part of that discount. Let me check on that because I'm not sure.
And then the other question is for the city attorney, the streaming tax. I'm interested in hearing more about that. I'm wondering though how, and maybe I'm missing something, but how is it not double taxation when we're already taxing based on charter or whatever internet service the resident has, and then on top of that you're charging another tax because you have to have the internet in order to stream?
So our ordinance actually provides that the tax is applied to both. If someone has streaming services, those are considered to be video services, and those are taxed separately because they are a separate provider. So their internet service provider is not the provider of the streaming service. We're talking about things like Netflix, Apple TV, et cetera.
Sure, but how
different
will you
providers.
we have a way of tracking?
Yeah, there is.
Netflix
There are some ways of not watching, subscribing.
Sure.
So it's the subscription service. They don't have to watch it even one time. It's the question of whether they're paying for the subscription. So our ordinance already has that in it. It just has not previously been collected. There was a case winding its way through the courts, language similar to our ordinance. That case was ultimately resolved in the favor of the city on collection. And that was a case brought by Disney's streaming service. What has happened as a result, just recently, last month, the California Supreme Court denied review of that case, letting the lower courts, Court of Appeals, stand, which provided the city the opportunity to then collect this, and the litigation costs were on a different city. So that's why we brought that forward, because that case came down. We do believe, and we would want to dig into it a little bit further, but we do believe that that is a not insignificant source of revenue to the city. But we would want to examine that a little deeper. If the council is interested in doing that, we certainly can do it. The potential upside of that revenue source, unlike increasing the documentary transfer taxes, you don't have to go do any changes to your ordinance to accomplish same.
Thank you. My last two questions. One is the property transfer tax. I know that we have to keep up with the other cities and the going rates and that type of thing. So I'm not that I'm against it, but I do want to caution us that, I feel like we continuously fund our city on the backs of the residents versus having revenue generation. And I think the speaker, Ann Carr, talked a little bit about that. And I agree. I think we need to absolutely be focused more on enhancing revenue rather than putting it on the backs of the residents to support our city. But I also then do think that we need to look at the code enforcement tactics about the derelict buildings and properties, because I think that is overrunning our city, and it's like a plague that we can't seem to get rid of. And so I would be all in favor of that. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks. Councilmember Ledeju.
Just to the point that was made, POAC's budget isn't here. And I have had a discussion with ACM Conley regarding that. And I do expect it to come back before this council. And I've talked to the city attorney about it as well. So I expect it to come before the council.
We've provided that estimated information to the finance department, so.
Okay, so thank you for that. And then I agree as it relates to code enforcement. I also think it's important, yes, I agree in economic development, but I also agree that we do have to consider how we keep pace with changes in our property transfer tax, and how long has it been the same? When was the last time that we've made adjustments? So those are things that you still need to look at for consideration. Whether you make the decision or not is one thing, but to understand how long something has been the same is also important to understand. And so today, I don't know how long that the property transfer tax has remained the same. Additionally, I think something as a city that we need to consider when we think about abandoned buildings as well. It's not just code enforcement, but in that process, what are we enforcing? What is the cost of that enforcement, meaning to the individuals who are not taking care of their property? And how are we consistently enforcing and collecting? And I think that's also sometimes part of the problem, is the consistency in enforcement versus, do we have the laws or ordinances on the books? Are we doing it consistently? In addition to that, I think fundamentally for me, this budget presentation really is to meet the goal of the charter, because there's really not, from my perspective, anything that we can truly comment on if, in fact, we're waiting for the city manager to come in and lend his expertise to this process. So I don't think we need to spend a lot of time belaboring what's in this document. From my perspective, we are meeting the terms of the charter, and we are waiting on our city manager to really have a robust discussion around his expertise and guidance to the staff to bring back a budget to this council to make a decision and to have some real dialogue around. So I'm hoping we don't stay here for the next several hours. I'm just going to be honest about it. Thank you.
All right, I'll just go continuing down the line. I would agree with Councilmember Ledeju. I think that's the direction we're headed, is we'll give our comments and then, continue this process in a few weeks. I do just have a few points to note in what was presented. Completely agree about the issue of the POAC. I think we need to get that included. I'm supportive of updating the property transfer tax. I would probably go in the direction of a more moderate increase, just because I don't think we want to shock the system. But looking at the comps, I think there's room for a modest increase that would still keep us very, very affordable and competitive. If we had to choose between code enforcement and fees as revenue generating, I would say cracking down on code and vacant buildings over increasing fees. I think we had this conversation before about, the risk of increasing fees, particularly for essential items, is that you have folks that then just don't get permits. So I would want more analysis of that. And just, I think with affordability issues, if we can avoid doing too much on the fee front and going more on code, I think that would be preferable. With the utility user tax, I think that makes a lot of sense. I'm not opposed to exploring that. I would just ask that we think about whether if there's a way to do it per user, because I think a lot of folks, the way that streaming services work, a lot of people get Netflix and Hulu and Disney, or they bundle, or they do this, and finding a way to make sure that people aren't getting gouged 3 times for 3 services that they have bundled, or just making sure that we're considering those aspects. That, you know, if it used to be you got a certain fee for your cable, and now you have 3 streaming services replacing your cable, are you paying 3 times as much as you would if you paid cable? I think that would be a question we would want to answer through the process. Just a couple of notes. I think for the community, I hear loud and clear every day, streets, 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 streets. I think removing street funding, I think we need to figure out how to keep that in, because that is going to send the wrong message to our community. I think especially if we're using P for police and fire and other stuff and not for streets, or if we are using, I think we just need to make sure we're putting enough into streets. Our community wants and needs that, and we need to not let that go. And then little things, the board and commission dinner, $19K, there has got to be a better way to do that more economically than spend $19,000 on a dinner. So just stuff like that, if we can start to kind of think more economically, and do the types of cuts that our residents are having to do every day. I see that as opportunities to just sort of signal that we're taking this seriously. I think that's what I have now. Measure P, I respect what the committee has said. I would just be very wary of setting any long-term expectation that we're going to fund things like technology, Flock, iHeart, stuff like that out of P. That makes me uncomfortable. I think those things should probably come out of the general budget. I would hate to have just P be a crutch for those things. We might consider it for a 1 year as we go through this transition, but I just wouldn't want to set the expectation that we're going to, that's going to be the extension of the general fund where we just put any expense to free up room in the budget. And just to clarify, so Flock and Axon, are those in the baseline budget? And if they got approved by P, we'd move them out, or are they not in the baseline budget?
No, nothing that is going to measure P is in the baseline budget.
Okay, that's important to know. So we don't have, right now in the baseline budget, we don't have Flock and Axon.
Right.
And we don't have iHeart. Okay.
Right.
I think that's all I've got.
Well, iHeart was funded.
iHeart already got
Well,
funded.
I mean, it was recommended to be funded, I
Yeah.
should say.
Yes, sir. And Danny Murphy, but that's ongoing?
So that's actually going to measure P on the 11th.
But we already approved that, correct? Or just for this fiscal, we just approved it for this fiscal year, though,
For-
every year. So that would be for next fiscal year. Okay. Okay, we'll deal with all that on the back end, but I wanted to raise that. And we'll just now continue down the line. I'll go to the vice mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. And not to beleaguer the point and the fact we're waiting for the important input from our interim incoming city manager. But I do want to share the thought and the emphasis of revenue generating resources. I know, especially at our planning commission meeting last night, the city council will be receiving a comprehensive report of I guess a homework assignment they received, and specifically the derelict buildings came up, things of that nature of identifying where some of these other funding resources that we can come to identify. So with that being said, I think moving forward is I think once again the emphasis should be on the revenue generating ideas and being more economical and more, I wouldn't say frugal, but more effective with where we're actually spending our monies, especially in our condition that we're in right now, and looking forward to the feedback and guidance of where our interim city manager, our incoming city manager can help guide us through his wealth of experience. So thank you.
All right, Councilmember Gordon.
Good evening. Thank you so much for this report. I do agree. I want to hold property owners accountable, home and commercial. The fees is crucial. I do notice that cities who enforce this have a overall beautiful city. I'm not saying perfect, and it's all throughout the city. As you know, District 6 is a prime candidate of this issue. And also to people who leave their property abandoned, they should be also held accountable. Because there is a nasty rumor out there that people buy properties, whether they live within the city or without the city, within or without the city, they tend to use these properties as tax write-off, especially if it's in a known crime area, whether it is a crime area or not, but just having that stigma connected to it, it gives them an opportunity to use that property as a write-off. I can't get anyone to live in it. I can't get anybody to have a business in it because the challenges, which is so incorrect. It's just a gimmick. And so I definitely hope that we can do that because that's all along Sonoma Boulevard. I also would like to ask regarding the code enforcement. I don't know if this is a proper place or not, but hopefully if it's not, you can help direct me in future. But could we get a balance of the fees and fines that has been collected within the last year since we've been sitting? And I just want to make sure if we do go this route of holding these fees and fines accountable, that it is consistent and is equaled. And I don't care who you know. I don't care if it's my mom. She owes, she pays. Simple as that. And then I do want to know, I had another question here. One moment, please. Maybe I can ask the city attorney. May I ask you, what is this issue about 400 Mare Island Way? This has been a selling conversation since I've lived here. And I've been inside of it. It's beautiful. I thought the city was going to go there. What is going on with that? Because it is a valuable property, and it's just sitting there.
Sure. It does have some occupancy and some rental income associated
Exactly.
with it. So there are occupants in the building on the ground floor, not on the second floor. I assume what you're asking is about restrictions on
Yes.
the disposition of that property. The city, during bankruptcy, borrowed a great deal of money and had to pledge assets to the bond repayments, essentially associated with the loans we took to bridge the city's operations across the bankruptcy. The city pledged most of the city's assets to this building, other buildings, et cetera, to that financing. That's fine. That building was purchased after that financing was pledged. However, one of the assets that was pledged was the golf course, the Blue Rock Springs Golf Course. At the time that we considered selling the Blue Rock Springs Golf Course, the city had virtually no other assets to replace that pledge with that were not already encumbered, and it was determined at that time to replace the pledge with 400 Mare Island Way. So that building cannot, for lack of a better word, be sold because it is encumbered by the loan pledge. The issue surrounding unencumbering it or trying to unencumber it has to do with the very favorable interest rate that we have on that money. You could not even possibly touch an interest rate to refinance today and remove some of the pledged assets. When we refinanced previously, it cost us a great deal of money because we have to pay all of the bank's fees and costs associated with looking at another asset. And as I said, it was very hard to find another asset. So it doesn't look particularly, you want to say viable at this time, and Nalengo has, sorry.
Yeah, no,
City Manager Connolly has looked at this issue months ago, actually. We went through this analysis. She reached out to experts with regard to this issue. I'll let her speak to that.
Yeah, through the chair, I'll just say this will be part of a larger conversation when we start talking about financing options. There were a number of city properties that actually we paid off quite a bit of our debt that fell off, like City Hall and there was a whole list of other assets that are now not encumbered under the debt service. 400 Mare Island Way is still encumbered, as City Attorney Nebb said. So we have outstanding, I think, debt somewhere around $28 million. And so that is used as collateral. I believe that the purchase price was somewhere around 13 million, somewhere around there. The value has gone up, but it's not gone up enough to cover the debt service. So, currently we're sort of keeping that agreement in place until we really figure out what we want to do, because as Neb said, the interest rate is really low. I mean, we would never get that again, considering interest rates right now. I think is it 1.8%? I think it's something around there. I think it's under 2% interest rate. So it's just, everyone would kill for something like that. So we don't want to necessarily, renegotiate or somehow refinance unless we're really sure that it's to our benefit. So selling 400 Mare Island Way will not generate enough revenue to essentially satisfy that debt.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it. Why can't we lease it then?
That we can do. It can generate revenue under those circumstances. Again, part of it is leased to the Veterans Administration, I believe, at current, and then the Professional Standards Division is in there. There are some, I'll call it challenges, leasing space that is, there would have to be a conversation about security, et cetera, to lease additional space. The space that is on the second floor is, has no tenant improvements. It's kind of all one space currently. It doesn't have interior walls, if that makes sense. It's all just the exterior walls, and then it had been cubicles is what it had been when the insurance company was in there, which was the previous tenant to the city. Which was the previous owner to the city, sorry.
Thank you for that. So I just...
Examined, I'm not saying it couldn't.
Yes, maybe we, the council, can think of something in the future to see what we could do to make something out of that, some kind of funding. And then regarding the employee situation, I know we're going to revisit that. When you come back with that, I would like to know exactly where you're looking to cut staff, not just a blanket 50 this, 20 that. I just want to know exactly each department that you're looking into considering cutting. Thank you.
Great. Councilmember Palmares.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the presentation. A few comments. So I'm interested in at least having the conversation about the real property transfer tax. The city of El Cerrito a few years ago was on the verge of bankruptcy and turned themselves into a charter city, did the real property transfer tax, and they seem to be thriving right now. So I don't think that's the worst option we could consider. I was thinking about this a few years ago, hesitant to push for it because the way I saw it, I don't think we could credibly evidence that we were being as fiscally responsible as we can and should be. But I think the time to really consider it might be now. We got a performance audit that's around the corner. We have a new interim city manager that's also around the corner who's going to bring some new tools and skills as far as financial management. So maybe this is a good time to have that conversation. Another thing that we should consider, and I know this is probably just a little blip in terms of like revenue, but a trench cutting fee. Look into the city of Davis. I brought this up to the former Public Works or interim Public Works director, but kind of got lost in the shuffle. But the way they do their calculation in the city of Davis is different than ours, and I think we stand to gain a little bit more money, especially when it comes to PG&E cutting the road. They tend to get compensated a little bit more in Davis, so I think that's something worth exploring and putting that into the master fee schedule. I also don't want to get too much in the weeds of some of the stuff that's more in the lane of economic development, but I do want to put it out there that I really believe that we should go invest more into event making and under no uncertain terms really get behind the Solano County Fairgrounds and their event making. That is an asset most cities do not have, and we should really get behind them, maybe get a music festival. But the more we invest and get behind them, and they have new leadership right now, we can stand to earn a little bit more revenue. And also, just something to consider, we could also introduce an admissions tax. So on top of everything else, and food and beverage and whatnot, because it's not really a sales tax, but if we introduce an admissions tax, that's something we could also get for ourselves if we get to the place where we are really cooking with more events going on in Solano County Fairgrounds. So just want to put that out there, something to investigate, since we're looking into all the strategies to gain more money. Thank you.
Councilmember Matias.
Thank you, Mayor. Quick question for City Attorney Neb. There's a $700,000 litigation defense fund request. What is the increase relative to what's in our budget today?
I do not know the answer to that question because that fund is managed by risk.
So that's coming from risk.
Mm-hmm.
City Manager Conley, I want more information on that. So that's frankly outrageous to me. And I want to better understand what's driving that or what the increase is relative to this year.
So maybe it might help to know what the fund is for. So that is essentially our fund that pays deductibles. And I'm using that word for the public to understand. We have our self-insured retention. When something goes over our self-insured retention, then it's paid by our insurance carrier, but our self-insured retention is paid out of that fund. I believe that is correct. Lungo, right? Or maybe Florida can.
No, I believe that's correct, but we'll check with risk to determine and we'll get back to you.
So, when it gets used over the course of the year and is depleted, they bring it back up to what is the anticipated level of what might be needed, so the council isn't hit with an unexpected. Some years we don't use any of it. Some years we use some of it. So I think risk can give you that information, but
Yeah.
That's tracked in that department.
Yeah, we just want to sort of understand the trends and understand what's
Understood.
driving the increase. And if that's necessary to support that increase, if there is an increase for next year. That's one. Two, on code enforcement, I know I worked with Mayor McConnell, Councilmember Roberto Liga, Councilmember Braganza, Councilmember Matulak, just getting additional, and Vice Mayor Laura Diaz, how can I forget? Getting additional staffing into that department, and I think the logic or the reasoning at the time was that if we hired more staff, we would see an increase in revenue. That revenue has been very uneven for that department, and I don't really know what is going on. So whether that's if it's that we're dropping the ball on compensation for officers, whatever the case is, I think we need to get back to a level where we're getting at least somewhere between 700 and $1.2 million a year, which was before the pandemic where we were, and we haven't been there anymore, and I don't know why. I would like more information on that, and I want to see us set a target for what we expect to collect and what actions are going to be taken for us to collect that amount in the year ahead. And then the last item has to do with an effort that Fairfield undertook 2 years ago, and Benicia will have it on the ballot this fall, and that's business modernization tax. City Manager Conley. So Benicia, for example, put a freeze on business licenses for any business that was grossing in under 10,000. They have that exemption in place through 27. Fairfield and now Benicia, they're sort of going through a process of restructuring what types of businesses get leveled what fee. We have a lot of businesses opening up in our community that are more retail, food, hospitality based, and so are we able to, put something on the ballot that incentivizes more of that, because that's what's kind of opening up in our city, knowing that if we do that, we would be able to collect revenue in other ways, because there's sales tax, there's this, there's that, so. I don't know if we've missed the boat on a business license modernization effort relative to the November election, but I think if you can just check in with the Fairfield group and the Benicia group, we should look into that as a not just as a revenue enhancement, but also as a business attraction tool. So that's all I have for this evening. Thank you.
All right, thank you. We've gotten a couple more requests for comment. City Attorney Neb, did you have something else to add, or is that your mic from
It's
earlier?
actually a question that is sort of tagged into Councilmember Letaju's question about POAC and the budget for POAC. May I?
Go ahead.
Ms. Conley, one of the other things that we had sent over, and Florida, maybe you can answer this question, was the need to replenish the Cal DOJ deposit funds. My calculation for that fund was down to like 32,000 or something like that. And as you know, when our deposit account with them depletes below to the $100,000 mark, we have to replenish that deposit account up to 300. Do you know whether or not that is contained within this baseline budget? The money for that fund, because we have to do it within 10 days, so there's no time to come back to the council on a basis that asks them for an adjustment to the budget to replenish that funds, because contractually we're obligated to replenish within 10 days. Is that money in the baseline?
So that is actually the $700,000. That's for the Jensen Hughes. So that's to replenish that fund to bring it up to $1 million, because that's what we received as an estimate for what those expenses would be. So that's that $700,000 litigation fund. It's for the Jensen Hughes DOJ.
And that is statutory is the wrong word. That is contractually required.
Yep. So, and just to address POAC, it wasn't included on this only because the timing of creating this and sort of what was happening with mid-year, but we do have an estimate of somewhere around $650,000 for POAC. And that does include funds for the independent auditor, what are you calling, the attorney, the assigned attorney, as well as a training budget.
All right, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I'm just adding a little more context to that. That number came from us. It was really a thumb in the air. We do not have those proposals back yet for each of those items. That number will tighten one direction or the other when we have those proposals back, and then we kind of give an estimate of the number of hours that each of those outside people would be engaged in. So we wanted to drop a placeholder so it could happen now, but there will be likely an adjustment one way or the other.
All right. We have had requests for a couple more questions from council, so I'll go quickly to Councilmember Gordon and then Councilmember Letaju, and then we'll wrap up.
Thank you. I'm not sure who this question should go to, but I'm going to go to you, the city attorney, Veronica Knapp. The Grant School, what is going on with that property that's in District 6? It was said that it was owned by the school, and then it said it was owned by the city, then it said partial of it was owned by the city because the fire department have some of it. But it's just a property that's been sitting there since I've been here. And why can't we sell it?
I don't think we have it, but ACM Hain will come up and explain what occurred there.
Public comment? So what happened with the Grant School, at the same time that the city was looking at the Farragut School, we were researching Grant School for a potential fire department expansion or future housing project. At that time, after we gathered all the information and came to city council, we only moved forward with Farragut. So Grant School was not purchased by the city. So we do not own that. We are not involved in that whatsoever.
So the school district owns it still?
I believe, I'd have to double check because it's been a couple of years, but last I heard, maybe a year ago, they still owned it. So I can check and look into it and get back to you.
Thank you. So, City Attorney, do I ask for a request investigation to the school district regarding this property? Because it is becoming another Army depot situation. I mean, people are in there, and it's considered to be unsafe. We tried to clean it, and we got a warning not to because it was toxic.
That went into the decision not to take it, actually, that the information you're describing right now. What I can say is that we have developed this, task force to look at problem properties. We can take that up at our next meeting and look at what the options are and then get back to you and to council about
That's a good
what
fee
that looks like.
to think about.
Yeah.
Thank you. And my next question to maybe yourself or to, I do know that Gillian was working on this project. Could we tax the EVs? Because we have Tesla, we have all these different entities, and are we getting monies for that? Especially in my district, we have two that's by the new Didi's.
Are you talking about the charging stations and charging
yes.
at the charging stations?
Yes. Do we get funding for that?
Currently, no, they're free. So we'd have to double check with Public Works and our contracts on those to see if there's an ability to charge for that service.
Yes, that's a hidden gem. Thank you. That's what my question was. Thank you.
All right. Councilmember Lettish.
So again, I know we're waiting for our new city manager, but one of the things that I want to touch on is Measure P. And while there are a host of things going to Measure P, I understand why, and they fall within those guidelines. What I do want to caution us about is if any of those requests are ongoing, how do they get funded from an ongoing perspective? And really, at some point, if it's a continued expense year over year, is Measure P really the right place? And so that's something that really should be considered, even though I know the Measure P Commission is looking at each one of those different requests. But we need to consider what is the longevity. It's no different than looking at a grant, and when that grant ends, how those services are going to continue within community. So I do really want the staff to consider, are these ongoing expenses and where should they really lie in our budget?
All right. With that, I will check back in with ACM Conley quickly. Is there anything else you need from the council this evening? Direction on any specific item? And if not, we will go ahead and close out.
So I think we have a lot here. I think we have enough direction. We can bring back some strategies, and some considerations, more detail around the revenue generating piece. If no one has any specific items that they wanted to pull for Measure P, we can just let that play out because they will all come to you in some way, shape, or form as either recommendations to or recommendations to not move forward. So,
That sounds good.
okay,
Well,
thank you.
seeing nothing else, thank you again. Thank you, everyone that stayed with us in person and online. We will go ahead and adjourn at 8:03 p.m.